What up there? I see. So Andy, is that all right if I hand over to you?
Absolutely. Let me just, I have a very chatty style, by the way. I prefer people just to interrupt and to talk, put their hands up and say stuff, because I don't want to be lecturing people. It's, as you'll see, I have a particular view on brand, and I love branding. I think it's one of the most privileged positions to be in a business. And you'll see that as I come across here. So I'm also quite iconoclastic in the sense I think everything should be questioned. I've spent 25 years doing this, and I spent the first 15 years of it making it as complicated as possible for clients, because I ran big agencies, and the more complicated I made it, the more margin I made. Right? The fact is, it shouldn't be that complicated. Branding isn't rocket science, but a lot of people find it intimidating, and it can be overcomplicated. So let me just share my screen. Now, tell me, can you all see just the one slide? Lovely. I thought of different ways of titling this, and the more correct thing is once more with feeling. There's a whole area of branding which is, we've kind of lost a lot of what brands stand for, and there's been a lot of process and procedures being put in place. And one of my biggest complaints is compliance. One of my biggest complaints is procurement. Now, I know they're very important, don't get me wrong, but we've gone from one angle to another. So if you look at the glory days of the 70s and 80s from a brand perspective, a lot of the magic has gone. That doesn't mean there aren't good brands out there, but one thing we've lost is feeling to a lot of brands. And I think that's largely because we've become very average. And it's not just me saying this. So, for example, it's a fantastic colleague of mine, well, that's actually a fellow brand strategist called Alex Morrill, who just a couple of weeks ago wrote this piece, called it The Age of Average. And I thought it was just very, very enlightening. Have a look, just have a look around you, go and have a look online and just Google things and just see how everything's become very standardized and very normalized. Some of it's very beautiful, don't get me wrong, it's lovely, but I mean, there's cosmetics, there's interiors, there's brands, everything tends to follow a certain flavor. Right? So it's not just me thinking, I'm going to show you a whole load of slides today that sort of show you my thinking. Now, I should also warn you, it's work in progress. I've been working on this for about 10 years, right? And each year I come up with something else, but it's stuff that works, right? And I'm starting to see a lot more MDs, CEOs talking to me about, can you not do brand mission and vision, for example? So only 2 months ago, I'm rebranding, and talk about a busman's holiday, I'm rebranding a global ad agency at the moment. Now, I had their creative director ask me, and excuse my language, he said, Andy, can you make sure we don't do that brand vision bollocks, please? I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. This is the creative director of a massive ad agency telling me this. He said, because we can't stand out, we can't differentiate. And one of the issues here is that there's nothing really wrong with mission and vision, don't get me wrong here, but it's a model that was put in really by Peter Drucker and a few others in the 60s and 70s, and somehow it's stuck, and it became the de facto way of doing things. Now, if it becomes de facto, it becomes common. It becomes, it's very hard to actually find a point of difference. And for me, branding is about finding a point of difference, or at least a point of relevance. So I'm going to change tack, and I do this quite a lot, by the way, when I'm talking, because I like to throw in a few sort of curveballs, but it's all relevant to brand manifestos. And we all know this brand, and it's cliched, and everyone goes, oh, Just Do It, isn't that a fabulous positioning? Don't they have a fabulous manifesto? And they do if you go and look at it. But I'm just curious, does anybody here know where Just Do It comes from? Someone might know. I'm just curious if anyone does know. Okay. So everyone looks at it and they see Serena Williams, or they see all these fantastic sports stars. But Just Do It were the last words of Gary Gilmore, who was executed in 1976 for murder. Right? Now, he was an interesting character. There's a very famous film about him called The Executioner's Song. And he was guilty of his crimes, but he demanded the death penalty. He just said, like, no, I did it, I need to go. And he got very angry that they wouldn't do it. All right? This is quite incredible if you think about it. They kept delaying it. And then finally, they asked him for his last words before, and most people say something about they're sorry or this, that, the other, and he actually said, let's do it. Now, Dan Whedon of Whedon and Kennedy, who created Just Do It, sat there and went, hello, that's quite appealing, really. I mean, it's coming from a very sad situation. But the point I'm trying to make is that it didn't come from process or procedure. right? It didn't come from some template. It didn't come from any kind of analysis, this, that, and the other. And most of the world's greatest brands were not created through process or procedure. They were created through something else. Now, you have to have some process and procedure around it for when you're verifying things and checking that they are culturally appropriate. They don't mean anything rude in different languages. But I always like to use that example as to show people that when they look, I mean, Apple had very different process and procedure and where it's going to. And what people do is they retrospectively apply these systems, these models, and these procedures that make people think, that's how they must have come up with them. They didn't. Okay, so it's just always important to remember that. Because what I'm not doing is dismissing process and procedure. We've just got to find the right balance. So if I go back to where I was going, I know this is a little girl. This is how I feel about branding. I absolutely love what I do. I can't think of a more privileged position in terms of advising people on brands. And we get to see, as a brand person, we get to see our work everywhere. We get to see it sometimes in Times Square. You get to see it on TV. You get to see it whatever. But it's the impact that it has on people and knowing that you can change people's behavior. Now, if you are somebody who owns a brand, who runs a business and has the responsibility of that, I can't encourage you more to have an attitude like this. Is that just think of what I have, the power that I have at my behest to do something with the brand or with the company that you can't do elsewise. You can't do it with procurement. You can't do it with finances. You can't do it with lots of different areas, obviously, in business. You can do with the brand. You've got permission to do things. And the only thing actually stopping you usually is yourself, right? And obviously some things about being culturally appropriate and things like that. But it's just remember to try and step outside that box. We spent a lot of time the last 10, 15 years being hemmed into a box, all of us, about what's the correct thing to do. We're not going to build the world's best brands. We're not going to build exciting things if we think about it that way. So from a cliché perspective, step outside that box and start applying it from a brand perspective. Now, this is what I mean. Okay, some of you will be familiar with these sorts of things, and I am. I've been doing this for long enough to know that some of these things do have a role. If you Google brand model, anyone who's trying to put together a brand model for their business will go, oh, what can I find out there? And you'll find that this is quite famous, the brand key on the left-hand side, but it's got 9 constituent parts. Okay, are they important? They are to a degree, but they don't all play the role that you need them to play. They're often, as I said, retrospectively put into a system to go, right, how did we get here? And they're often mechanisms, safety mechanisms. How can we look back in 3 years' time to see how we got to our brand? And then on the right-hand side, the more common sort of brand wheels. Now, they're very pretty. They look lovely, okay? But I would challenge you to look at that and go, right, okay, I'm going to build a brand off the back of this. I'm going to start doing things that go, what's my who, what's my why, what's my what, what's my how, what are my colors, what are my principles, what are all these things? It's far too complicated. But just remember that from an agency point of view, and I'm not anti-agency, by the way, I work with lots of them, and I still work with them, they're clients of mine, is that the more complicated branding looks like it is, right, the more you've got to put into it, right? And the more you've got to pay for it. And I've always believed, just step back a little bit and just have a look at, make sure you can see the wood for the trees. Now, there is a little bit more on this. This is a little bit of it. Tom Fishburne, who I love, who does those little comics about the branding industry. But we have got to this stage where, we have an almighty brand onion that everyone in the business goes, oh, is it on brand? Are we doing these things? Are we showing our values? Now, is that the right color? Is it? Brands have got to be flexible by nature, right? The thing here is what you're trying to do is make sure it's just relevant. Okay, so just don't fall into this trap. It really does. It becomes stifling and becomes very difficult to be creative with the things you're trying to do. And the last thing I'll just say about, before I get into sort of a bit more the meat and bones about this, is that brand purpose has become a big thing. Right? Everyone's putting their hand, what's our purpose, this, that, and the other. I call it brand porpoise all the time because I hear it again and again and again. Right? These are becoming tick box exercises. Right? You have to be very careful with what you decide what your brand purpose is, because most people aren't listening. I can show you loads of evidence that shows even millennials and Generation Y, who we always talk about they're far more in touch with these things. They're no different to you and I. Right? They are usually driven by what is fundamentally useful to them. So make things useful to them, make things interesting for them. And then this second point, noble cause corruption. Okay, now it sounds like a big term for quite a small thing, but it's quite a common thing now where businesses have convinced themselves of their brand purpose to such an extent that they're actually doing a disservice because they're nowhere near as purposeful as they think they are. They're nowhere near as ethical and sustainable as they think they are, but they purport this myth about it. And that is becoming a problem where it just becomes a big amorphous mass of sustainability, ethics, this, that, and the other. And I should point out, I run a business that specializes in brand ethics and brand sustainability. So this stuff is very, very important, but we've got to treat it with the gravitas that it deserves. So now, Suzanne and Angela hopefully recognize this slide, and that what you need to do here, and where brand manifesto comes in, is it allows you to step back away from all that overcomplication. Right now, Dave Trott is one of my favorite guys. He's a quite iconoclastic old ad man from the 70s, 18, 90s, who's now obviously retired and can say what he wants because he's got a big bank account and he can get away with it. But he talks about simplification, right? Stepping back, making sure you can see the wood for the trees. And when you're building a brand, understanding that there's actually 4 or 5 key things that you need to remember. Anything beyond that is complication. Right. So don't, if I can, one of the most important things for me out of today's chat is to keep you away from that overcomplication when building a brand, because it is hard to simplify. Everyone thinks, oh, it must be easy. Keeping things simple is not your natural instinct. Right. So because we have, again, there's loads of research to prove this. Marketers, for some reason, think if we make things look very complicated and very sexy and very slick, everyone loves it. No, only you do as the marketer. The person looking at it thinks it's overcomplicated. They think, can you please make it easy for me to make a decision to use this product or service? So there are just a few key things you need to remember before you start building brand manifestos. The first is this, and this alludes to my little picture of that, the happy girl earlier, is that, and this is provable. Brands are one of the most powerful influences of human behavior on the planet. Okay? If you take away things like war, pestilence, famine, and really nasty things that we don't like, you try and show me anything else that can convince millions of people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do, right? Now, there's a result of this, isn't there? Which is, well, hang on a minute, we've all got a brand then. So by default, you are holding in your hands, as a business person, as a marketer or a business owner, one of the most powerful things mankind has. Okay? Now, it's powerful in different ways, but, if you look at this, is Interbrand's global brand index they put out every year. And what it does, it just values brands. It's the top 100, and there are several of these that come out each year. But the thing just to look at is just to look at some of these numbers here. Apple's brand value is $482 billion, right? That is a theoretical number. No one's going to pay it, but these numbers are recognized by Deloitte, they're recognized by KPMG, they're recognized as on the books as brand value. Now, the reason why I brought this up here is that if you are a brand owner or a marketer, this should be your end goal. Right? What you are trying to do is maximize the value of your business and maximize the value of your brand. So see it through this lens. And I don't know about you, but I can't see any mission or vision statement that I think, oh, isn't that valuable? Oh, doesn't that maximize the value of that company's brand? Doesn't it make me more inclined to work with them? It doesn't. I challenge you to go to any website, have a look at the company's mission and vision, and come away enthused or excited by it. Right? It rarely happens. Okay, so remember, think about it from that perspective. The other thing, this gets up a lot of my colleagues in the branding industry, it gets their goat a little bit and annoys them, right? Branding is not a science, never will be, okay? And people's attempts to make it scientific are only you're banging your head against a brick wall. There are some elements of it that are scientific. You can look at some ROI, you can look at things, but nobody can tell you why they bought something. Nobody can tell you why they did something without post-rationalizing it and trying to think, why did I do that, okay? So, and the common response I'll give to anybody who challenges to say that if branding was scientific, they would all work because we'd have answers. We'd have, here's your process, here's your procedure, here's your product, it works, right? Most brands fail. So where's the science? Okay, so just remember, it's just a key point, just to don't become, confused by terminology, don't become confused by people trying to prove a point on ROI and this, that, and the other. You'll know when a brand works. One of the best definitions I like is, again, Dave Trott. It says your brand is essentially a tool to help you do more, to help you achieve more in a competitive context. Okay? And see it that way. It's the armor you wear when you go into battle. And this is the last point I just want to put on some sort of theoretical parts, is that you all know this, right? Is that where does the brand sit in an organization? It sits bang in the middle. It's the central organizing thought of any organization. Well, it should be. Right? Most people tend to think it sits in that top communications bubble. I spend most of my life, bottom left, culture and behavior, working with brand owners, working with marketing teams to go, right, how do we actually make this thing come alive? And this is the link to brand manifestos, right? There's very few mission or vision statements that will affect culture and behavior, because everyone looks at it and goes, that's the mission and vision statement. It doesn't mean anything to me. It's usually been created by a small group of people, right, who haven't been out and about, haven't spoken to people, and haven't made it relevant to people. And it sits well, and everyone looks at it and ticks and goes, oh, isn't that wonderful, right? It's not very practical. No one says my mission and my vision for today is this. So why are we using terminology that is evangelically based anyway? Now move on from that, use what I call vernacular language. So what does that mean? Okay, so through all of this, last sort of 10, 12 years, I've been thinking, right, what can we do with all this and make something useful to, you know, for clients, for brands, and to do something exciting with it? And if anyone who follows me on social media will know I'm not very kind about this individual, okay? This is Simon Sinek, but I have to give him some credit, okay? He has been instrumental in the rise of the brand manifesto. My problem with him is that simply, I think he's just taking it too far. So his whole start with why I think is important, but actually, if you really think about it, it's start with what. Everything is start with what. Okay, if you start with why, you're overdoing it, because most people get into business because they're trying to create something, they're trying to establish something. You know, and you know, Simon himself is a perfect example of a marketer. I mean, he's an ex Saatchi and Saatchi account exec, right? This is the man who knows how to present himself, and he's done very, very well. But you know, the start with why context, read the first chapter, read his first book. It's fabulous. It's the stuff after that which has also been taken a little bit too far. But yeah, you'll see that if you do ever find him on social media, so I'm not too kind about him. Now, this is a existing brand manifesto, okay? And I've got to give you a bit of backstory here. I discovered this 8 years ago, working with all people. I'm sure some of you know, with Adi Gilman at Gilman's. And he asked us to create a new brand for him. It was called Montpellier, which was a white goods brand, washing machines, all sorts of things like that. And whilst researching what could we do here with this brand, I stumbled across this statement. And I'm just, have a look at it. We are serious about food because it's more than simply cooking, because it's more of the new, not more of the same. It's not what can I do, it's what can I do next. I won't read it all out, but you can see there's quite a, you know, this isn't a mission statement. It's not a vision statement. There's no values in here. And it really caught my attention. Okay, I'm curious. Would anybody try and guess what brand this is? Anyone? Well, it's KitchenAid. Right? It absolutely flummoxed me. But hang on, here kitchen tools, kitchen equipment, this, that, and the other. You know, it should be about efficacy. It should be about, they look great, and you know, they are wonderfully looking designed kitchen implements. But they had this wonderful statement of intent behind it. So I started thinking, okay, what do we do with this? Right? How do we look at this in more detail? So I started to look up brand manifestos, and I discovered a few things about them. In terms of what are they? Right? It's a manifesto. It's a written statement that publicly declares your views, motives, and intentions, and it describes what you stand for, what you do, and what you're trying to achieve. Now, that part of it is quite easy to look at. So I get that, right? Then just look at the etymology of the word. Okay, it's derived from the Latin word manifestum, which means to be conspicuous. There's a clue there, right? And also the word manifest means to make something real. So when these words have meaning, they're not just written statements. They have to be more than that. And the third part, as I started to look at it, I realized actually most frameworks aren't fluid, right? They're quite rigid boxes, you know, brand, mission, vision, this, that, and the other, and those brand keys and those brand wheels. And what a brand manifesto essentially does is it allows you to build this fluid framework, which it evolves as you do things. Because one thing about a business is this brand has to evolve. People think, oh, we've done it for 3 years, 4 years, let's keep it this way. Brands can evolve on a monthly basis. I don't mean your identity, by the way. I just mean the way you know, in terms of how you communicate with people. What this does, a manifesto, is it comes without the fake constructs of mission, vision, and values, right? And they are fake. Right? They are things that we've created to try and give ourselves some structure around things. So if we just look a little bit further here, this is one of the most famous brand manifestos out there. And you probably haven't heard of it, right? It's a company called Holstein. Okay? Now they do, I don't describe as lifestyle. They do meditation. They do, you know, being in the moment. It's a kind of, you know, feel good brand. Go and have a look at it and they'll show you things about how to meditate, how to do things better with your life. And this one was written, I think about 2009, maybe. It's wonderful, right? This is your life. Do what you love, do it often. If you don't like something, change it. If you don't like your job, quit. If you don't have enough time, stop watching TV. If you're looking for the love of your life, stop. They will be waiting for you when you start doing things you love. Now, it's relevant to them because that's what they're about. They're about seizing the moment. They're about, meditation. They're about being more conscious about things like that. But it's lovely. What it doesn't do is to say about, here's our mission, here's our vision, here's how we're going to do things. It's fluid. It's lovely, right? Now, what this again starts to look at is who else is doing it? And this is a brand called Poseidon, right? They're a dive brand, okay? Diving is not a sport nor a creed, but a way of being for those who embrace curiosity, cherish freedom, and delight in discovering the unknown. Now, the level of language that you use is up to you because you have to find the right level for your business, okay? And but use vernacular language, right? Sometimes people do use the word passion, which I don't like the word passion because it's just so overutilized. It's like innovative, we're passionate. We believe in long-term relationships. I've been working with a large financial services brand for the last 3 or 4 years, and they've got thousands of partners around the country. Almost every single one of them says in their brand values that we believe in long-term relationships with our clients. It's like, really? Who doesn't? Why are you talking about that? Right? These should be given. Just tick the box and move on. And then, even the big brands do it. Now, this is 1997. Now, if you go and do some research on Apple, everyone tries to go and do it. You'll be very hard pressed to find their vision, mission, and principle statement. It doesn't really exist. Lots of people have kind of guessed at it, right? The closest you can get to any positioning from Apple is to look at these things. Now, this is 1997. It's the original Think Different campaign. Some of you will remember it. It was fabulous. It had people like Gandhi in it, obviously Einstein, Martin Luther King. It said, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules. These are the people that make the world go round. Now, Apple knew exactly what they're doing here. They're appealing to other people who think they're like them. We all think we're like them. We all think we're different. We all think we're a little bit crazy. Now, I'm about to put myself up to ridicule, by the way, this next slide, because if I believe in this stuff, I need to act it. And so one of the things I did recently was look at my own. Now, I have chosen, for whatever reason, one of my little icons that I use is this little baboon. Okay, there's a story behind that, which I won't go into now, but it fits. A baboon played a role in my life in a funny incident about 15, 20 years ago, right? But it's become an icon that I use. But one thing I did was to look at what would be my brand manifesto. So I wrote this. I have a simple philosophy, which is that whatever I produce must be either engaging, inspiring, and impactful. Ideally, it will be all three. That's because I believe that brands are one of the most effective influences of human behavior in the world, but they're not worth much if they don't do at least one of those. I also think that work should be enjoyable and like to collaborate with like-minded people who are positive and open-minded. Life's too short to waste time with people who don't feel the same way. Right? I wrote this about a year ago. I know from my own Google Analytics, it's the most looked at thing on my website, and it's the one that I get the most reaction to. Now, it's not right for other brands. It's just right for me, right? But it's just another example that it's manifesto based. I could have written on here, here's my mission, here's my vision, here are my values, right? Because I know it'll just send people into a yawn fest, right? So let's try it and avoid that. Now, the good thing about manifestos is that you can base it on your mission and vision. And if you've done all that work, go look at your mission, go look at your vision and rewrite it. Rewrite it in vernacular language that people look at and go, oh, they're interesting. They're relevant to me. They're human beings. They're not automatons running some big corporation, faceless corporation. So thankfully none of you laughed. But you've got to practice what you preach. Right? And I know that it does work. Okay. So let me come back. So how do we create one? Okay, so I've told you a lot of theory so far, but it's important theory because it informs the approach that you should take to do this. But and Suzanne and Angela will know, because I bang on about this all the time, and they'll be thankful to know I'm not about to go through a positioning exercise because they must have seen it a lot of times themselves. But I'm just going to show you some thoughts behind it. But I'm very happy, by the way, if anybody wants to talk to me afterwards, I'll take them through this positioning exercise because it's critical. If you, before you do anything with your brand, and I mean anything from identity through to manifestos. And if you still want to do the mission and vision, you've got to do positioning first. It is the mainstay of all brand work. Every brand I've ever worked with has done a version of what I'm going to show you now. Okay. So the first thing is we ask people, right? Do you know what your positioning is? And they'll always say, yeah, I know what my positioning is. And they'll go on, they'll describe something. And I'll go, whoa, no. All you've just done is describe your business. That's not your position. You've just described what you do. I don't want to know what you do. I want to know, what is it about you that makes you interesting? So things like, what is your positioning? Who is it aimed at? Why are you aiming at them? I would rather you aimed at a small niche than a wide group of people. Too many people, when they do brand manifestos or brand positionings, try and throw the net out wide, right? And the thing is, you end up being all things to everybody without being anything to anybody else, right? So you just become quite bland. Then, your position, is it built around actual attributes of the business? So do you do those things, right? Don't make them up, right? If you make them up, you look silly. How differentiated? Everyone wants to be different, but I've had everyone say, I'm unique, my business is unique. Now, unless you are very, very special, you are not going to be unique. You're probably not going to be that different. The key is to be relevant, right? So I always say to people, right, if you're 1% more relevant than the competition, you're going to win, right? So focus on being relevant to someone's issues, someone's problems, some challenge that they have. Now, those who have seen my positioning work are going to see something slightly different here, because I used to work with a thing called a positioning spectrum, right, which was a left to right tool. The problem with it is it put people into boxes, right? And if you're trying to create a brand manifesto, you can't be in a box, right? And you can't be linear either. You've got to be circular. So all this is, and as I said, I'm happy to take anyone through this later, because this on its own, by the way, is an hour. So, and I'm doing it in about 3 or 4 minutes. But as a business, you've got to decide what key attributes you have in 5 key areas, right? And this is from an internal perspective. You've got to decide what infrastructure do you have. So decide what it is, and then write it up. And I'm going to show you some examples in a second. You then got to decide, agree, what are your products and services? Write it up. What are your skills and approach in terms of how do you do it? Again, write it up and describe it. Then the bit everyone loves to do, what are your personality and values? That's where all the mission and vision traditionally sits, right? So who you are. And then the bit at the end, why are you doing this? Okay. But don't start with why. Okay. Start with what, please. If you start with why, you're overdoing it. Okay. Because your why is pointless until you know what you're doing. Right. So that's the only difference I'd say with me and Mr. Cynic. Now, so that's from an internal perspective. But something that I've added recently is that only acts for the internal side of things. There's a whole external aspect of this too. So you can see there's another 5 here. So between, there are 10 questions essentially. So the things you've got to look at from a consumer's point of view or a customer's point of view, whether B2B or B2C, is what's your availability, right? In terms of what are you offering them? What format does it come under? How much does it cost? What's the performance of your product or service? So what's its physical performances? What's its functional performances? What does it actually do, this thing, right? Now its character. How does it express itself? That's often logo and identity and things like that, okay? And packaging. And connection, these are critical things. How does it make the person feel? The person that's going to buy your service or product, how does it make them feel, right? And, that can range from it's efficient, it did the job. Those are good things too, or it makes me feel wonderful, I feel part of a community, this, that, and the other. But you've got to decide what they are. And that's a bit I can't help with here because it's a big exercise that sits out and go, right, let's do an audit of who we are and how we do things. And then the projection part, which is critical for anyone that buys your service or brand, they won't admit it, but so much of it is what it says about them. When they come and buy a product, come and say, I'm talking to you now as someone who's wasted a ridiculous amount of money on a £2,000 MacBook Pro, right? I know quite full well that it's because I think they make me look quite cool. They might not, but I think they do. And I'm 52 years old and I still fall for it, right? So the projection, how you make somebody feel about your business, is critically important here. And it works with telecoms, well, it works with all sorts of business. It doesn't, none of this is specific to any kind of sector. So I'm just going to put those 2 back up there. You obviously have copies of this. I could put it in a linear format. And the way anyone that's worked with me before knows that I also populate these. So I can give you lots of examples of other brands that sit in here and the answers that they've given. But if you don't remember anything else from me talking to you this morning, please remember this one. If you're going to do a brand manifesto, please establish your positioning. Without your position, you have nothing to say. Essentially, just an amorphous blob sitting amongst all these other competitors. So just make sure you do these 10. You'll also find there are lots of other positioning spectrums out there, by the way. So I'm not going to try and pretend that one's better than the other. It's all about how you get on with the person doing it, how you feel in your level of comfort. But make sure you answer these key questions. So part 2, how do you create it? Now, I'm hoping you'll now understand why I showed you all that theoretical stuff up front, because it's about being in the right frame of mind to do this stuff. So if you're going to capture a brand manifesto and establish what you stand for, there are some principles you need to put into play. And again, anyone who's worked with me will recognize some familiar frameworks here, which I've changed. And as I said, it's work in progress, where I believe in being able to put your brand on a page. So I'm going to give you 2 examples of working examples of 2 existing brands that have been worked on quite recently, who've done the brand manifesto approach. And the 6 things should be a descriptor of what you do as a business. So you would have done that positioning exercise I've just shown you. So you've got all your information sitting on little pads, papers, or whatever, which way you do it. You've got your identity, which is how you look, how you do things, which most people really is mission. Why you do things is vision. But don't use those terms. No one cares. Really, I can't say, every time I talk to someone about, what's your vision? They'll go, oh, here we go, what are we talking about? Then your personality is where your values sit. And then the last column is your theme, right? And your theme sometimes, it's a strap line. Now, I'm going to show you this company called the Bakery. Now, the Bakery is a condiments company, right? They go do relishes. They're upmarket shops like Waitrose. And I was working with them a few years ago, and they had an issue in terms of, sales were down effectively, and Waitrose were threatening them with, we'll remove you from Waitrose. Obviously, which is a colossal problem for them. Now, all we had to work on was this logo, literally, and this strapline, which is live to eat, right? Now, that's not much to go on a brand. And also, if you're an upmarket brand relishes, live to eat is more, it's not really gourmet. It's stuff your face stuff, right? And that's not right. Live to eat is the buffet bar and just, eat as much as you can. It's all about delicate tastes. So doing the positioning exercise allowed us to populate this. So column 1, and this is so important. If people start to think you've got to be really clever with how you describe yourself, this is the Ron Seal test. Just tell people what you do, which is we're a producer and distributor of fine artisan chutneys, accompaniments, sauces, and dressings. Stop. You don't need to say anything else, right? Let the brand do the rest of the work. Obviously, have the identity. Then the why you do it, okay, is to bring the wonder, adventure, and joy of nature's finest flavors into every home. Now, this won't be right for every brand, but Emma, who's the founder of this brand, this is what she told us. Sat down with him, because I created this brand 25 years ago on my father's kitchen table, trying to figure out what can we do with all these chutneys that we create as byproducts from our farm, right? And she said, and she would talk about the wonder of taste, the wonder and the emotion that food can deliver to people. Then the how you do it, and I will read this out, it's important, so most people are looking for a mission statement here, but it was that we believe that the sensation of taste is one of life's greatest pleasures and a privilege that should be enjoyed by as many people as possible. Food that tastes great makes life feel better. We all know that, right? Everyone should nod at this, going, of course it does, right? It can transform the way we feel. That's why all our products are made with a sense of adventure, a passion for tradition, obsession with extracting everything out of the finest natural ingredients, and a deep, deep love of food. Our goal is simple: to make the wonder and joy of nature's finest flavors a part of everyday life. Okay. Then personality, honest, adventurous, refreshing, and proud. Again, you can reel off those wherever you are, but the key thing here was looking at the difference that it makes to other elements. So, that it didn't fit that identity. Now, she told us we couldn't do anything with the identity, so we said we won't do anything with it, but we'll change it just a little bit. So it's the same identity, but something's happened to it. So the Bakery's still there, but we just said, look, this is all about explosion of taste and explosion of color. So make yourself look like you actually believe it. And then the live to eat became make the ordinary extraordinary. And it was a straight quote from Emma. I asked her, what do you do? She said, I make the ordinary baguette taste fantastic. She said, okay, there you are. Here is your brand on a page. And effectively, this reads to me more like a brand manifesto. And in fact, it's sitting right there. There's the brand manifesto. So you've got this brand model, but the way you've created it, using that positioning spectrum and coming from a different angle, instead of using vision, mission, and values, there is your statement of intent, your brand manifesto. Now that's on the website now. It's the way they go to market, and it's it's completely transformed them. They're still in Waitrose, 7-8 years later, and flying. So Now, I'm aware that's a B2C example. So let me just show you a B2B example, a more recent example. Actually, look, I forgot about this slide. There's the difference in the two brands. Okay, exactly the same product, totally different positioning, and totally different brand manifesto. The one on the right is far more appealing. Okay, now I'm showing you a very obvious example. If I now go to a B2B, some of you may have heard of this company because they recently sold. Okay, now I should add that is that part of the reason for them coming to us to work with us is because they knew they wanted to sell. So how do we create a more valuable brand? And again, the thing we said to them, manifesto, stick away, go away from the vision and mission because everyone's doing that, do something slightly different. So this was a company, was actually called One Team Logic. You couldn't ask for a more illogical brand name for a company that does this. And their strapline was safeguarding and education, okay? So same process, we do the positioning spectrum, ask all those questions, and we have some straight answers. To the descriptor, we provide safeguarding solutions that prevent, reduce, eliminate abuse, harm, and neglect, and protect the well-being, health, and human rights of children and adults all over the world. What they were was a business that provided software into schools, educational establishments for adults and children that essentially make sure that your safeguarding processes are first class, right? Now, the thing about this, it's a very, very serious topic. There is no room in this topic for any kind of misdemeanor, any kind of flippancy with the brand. It's, you know, the two founders of the business are two ex-Devonshire, the head of police in Devonshire Police, very serious man, okay? And this is a serious topic. So why do you do it? We believe that it's the duty of every civilized society to take care of all children and adults wherever they live, learn and work. I'm not going to read it all out because I know you can see that, but you can see there is a statement of intent, what I would call a brand manifesto, which you won't get from values, mission, value, you know, and vision. How you do it, again, that's just more describing the fact they're not just a software business. They're about the fact that they are manned by an entire team of safeguarding experts. So you're not just buying software, you're buying a backup team. Personality-wise, authoritative, progressive, guides, activists, all this stuff doesn't really matter at this point. The most important bit is the manifesto aspect of it. But if you look just on here, the theme was for everyone everywhere. That everyone needs safeguarding. We all do, whether you're parents, whether you're children, whether you're an adult educator, you know, it affects us all. And the last part of this was, okay, well, what do we do with this name then? Right? Once you've got a brand manifesto in place, it makes it much easier to decide what you are. They're now called the Safeguarding Company, and 4 weeks ago they were bought by Times Educational Supplements to be part of TES's growing suite of products and brands. Now, what I'm not trying to put up here, I'm not trying to say these are the best brands in the world, but they've been created from a brand manifesto perspective. And the thing that's really important is the journey that the team came on with us. Everyone's involved in these things. Right? And what you do is you end up with a far more organic brand at the end of it, but people are going, oh, we were involved in that. We did that. And also, remember what I said earlier, you're going to look a little bit different to everybody else. Now, there is a counter argument. Let's say in 10 years, everyone's doing brand manifestos. Fine. Okay, we'll be back in the age of average. But that's 10 years from now, right? Most brands aren't doing this. Right? There is an opportunity for progressive, dynamic brands, the guys I tend to work with, doing this kind of work. You know, it's sensational in terms of you know, the impact we're having on individuals in terms of employees and CEOs of engaging people in this process. So there you see, right? Now there's, interestingly, their brand manifesto is in a different column to the Bay Tree, because it doesn't matter. The point I said earlier, these are fluid frameworks, right? In the older brand, vision, mission, values thing, your brand manifesto would have to sit in a particular column. Here, we knew that the strongest statement was the why we do it. So let's stick with that. And that is everything that the company stands for. So this is actually the front of all their presentations. It's their go-to statement of intent, the campaign statement. So and you can see here a little statement. I mean, I'm only showing you this to see the difference that they had to, you know, everyone heard they were as One Team Logic, you know, actually no, they're the safeguarding company. So, and this is only 18 months ago, they've now been sold. Okay. The thing is now they've been sold hook, line and sinker. So everyone's gone across with the team. It's not one of those things where they, you know, thank you very much, we'll sell it and get out. These are individuals who firmly believe in what they're doing. It's a very important topic. So now the last little part of this is, okay, I've shown you the theory at the front end. I've shown you some practical examples of brand manifestos. There's still a big challenge here. You've got to write it. Okay. Now, anyone will tell you, I mean, copywriting is a tough skill, right? It's often the challenge is to keep it short. Most people can write very long form things, and I often get sent things that are 2 pages long. The simpler and shorter you can make it, the better. But there are a few key principles in terms of how you're going to write a manifesto. About 5 or 6 things you need to remember. The first is please look for inspiration. There's a fabulous book by a guy called Mark Earls, who is a marketing professor, called Copy, Copy, Copy. Right? And in it, he says there's no shame in copying people. Right? Most of the best ideas, most of the best things out there are already in practice. Somebody's doing it. You may be able to look at it and do a better version, but go and look for things. Okay, unless they're copyrighted, that's slightly different, right? Okay, you don't go around copying people's brands and copying people's ideas, but there'll be plenty of things out there. So what I showed you earlier, what got me on this track was starting to look at brand manifestos and going, hang on a minute, there are a few progressive brands doing this. It's exciting stuff, you know, and they're cutting through. The second thing is there's 4 key questions to ask. Okay, what gives your business meaning? Internally and externally, and that's that positioning. That's where those 2 wheels exist. There's the external aspect of it and then the internal aspect of it. Okay, so ask yourself what gives you meaning. Please don't go down the route of the start with why thing, though, about, you know, we're going to make your life, we're going to change your life, we're going to give you wings, we're going to all that sort of stuff. Don't fall into that trap. Okay, keep it real. Okay, what do you want your legacy to be? So what, you know, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, what do you want to have happened? Consider that. And it needs to sit in your brand manifesto. It's your direction of travel. Then what kind of actions align with your personality? So if you were describing your business as an individual, what would they be doing? How would they be acting? You know, that's where you need to avoid these things like we're innovative, we believe in long-term relationships, all that stuff, because that's incredibly difficult to put into a personality. Right? And your brand's got to have personality. And I'm very aware here, by the way, I have a lot of my colleagues in the industry saying, Andy, you're oversimplifying it. We need to base this stuff on scientific reason and rationality. You don't. Okay. If there's one area of your business where you have permission to spread your wings a little bit, where you should be doing things, where you should be engaging people, it's right here with the brand. Okay. Everything else about what we do in business, we all know it's pretty rational stuff. Okay? This isn't one area where you can do something. And the last question is, what are you willing to do to accomplish your goals? Write them down. Okay, obviously within reason, make sure they're legal, okay, and they're acceptable, socially acceptable things to do, but write all this stuff, capture it, okay? Now, once you've captured this, you know your position, you can start to fill in that little template I gave you earlier in terms of the 6 columns. There's a few more here. Be provocative, right? The word manifesto says to be conspicuous. So when you're writing these things, remember, you want someone to read it and go, oh, hello. That's new, that's different, I wasn't expecting that. These are the things that get me excited about brands. Whenever I look to a potential partner that I'm going to work with or a potential client, I go to the About Us section and I look for these areas. And I look for little nuggets that tell me, there's something about these guys that they genuinely believe in this stuff. They're going to do it. It's not just a brand exercise and a cosmetic exercise. Right? This is critical. Number 4, don't do it on your own. There are way too many marketing directors or CEOs who go off and write the brand manifesto. They then turn their business into a personality cult, right? Which is just representing them. Okay? And this happens all the time. And everyone says yes because they nod, because you've got this powerful CEO coming and going, oh, look, I wrote it. Oh, that's great. You're lovely, because I couldn't dare say anything else, right? Don't fall into that trap because it's dangerous. What's appealing to your CEO is not so appealing to your end guys. And also, you've got to remember, you're trying to bring the team along with it. This is an internal exercise of bringing your team with you. So involve them. Right? Language is critically important. Okay, invest in a copywriter, at least somebody who can use human terminology. And when I say human terminology, somebody who talks as they write, rather than, we've all seen it when we suddenly go into a brochure and we look at something and suddenly there's paternalistic language that's just not particularly human. It's ritualistic, it's processed, it's this, that, and the other. And please don't fall into that trap of SEO searchability. Okay, I can point you to a whole load of research will tell you you're wasting your time. Okay, just make things relevant. I was doing some work for a company just 2 weeks ago where they asked me just to change some of the terminology on their page, on their website. And I turned about 16 pages into 2. Right, and they said, oh yeah, but we were told to repeat all this stuff because it's really good for search engine optimization. Show me, honestly, show me the research and the ROI that proves that, because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Now, I know there's lots of digital guys will turn around and say you're speaking heresy here. I can tell you it doesn't exist. Okay, right? Last but one, publish it. If you do these brand manifestos, put them left, right, and center everywhere. Okay, they are your go-to market strategy. They are your voice. So don't just hide it on page 50 on your website or page 10, whatever it is. Up front, please. These things are important. They are your, your standard that you are wearing into battle, for want of a bad analogy. And the last one is live it. Okay, it's pointless doing these unless you go and live it. The amount of times that we've all done this, or we've created great brands or created great campaigns, and then we sit on it, and it doesn't go, or we're not quite brave enough to do something. Just do it, right? Again, oh, there you are, back to our friends at Nike at the beginning. Just do it, get on with it. Okay, if you've done enough due process on this, you've done enough research, you'll know it's safe. Okay, trust your instincts. There is a quote, I think it's Lou Gerstner, who's the IBM guy, I think, who wrote about all his biggest decisions. I know we're going back to the 1780s. He said that every single one of his biggest decisions, the ones that made the biggest impact on the business, were gut decisions. Now, he's simplifying it because they're gut decisions backed up with some research and some detail, obviously. But at the end, he didn't go on ROI. He didn't go on this. He went with, I know this is the right thing to do because it feels right. Right. So as long as you've got the technicals in place, you've done enough due diligence, go with your gut. And as the brand manifesto allows you to do that. Okay? Now, I'm just going to finish. Years ago, I went to a talk in Mumbai. I was living in Singapore, and I went to a talk in Mumbai. And I can't for the life of me remember the author, but he's quite a famous author, and he gave a speech. And he did it deliberately. He presented Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech by PowerPoint. Right? Okay? And he absolutely butchered it, but deliberately, just to say, look, if we presented the most famous speeches, the most famous diatribes, this, that, and the other, in the way that everyone tells us to present things, we would kill them. Right? And I'll just leave you with this thought, right? Okay. I mean, that's essentially what he was saying, is I have a strategy, right? But it does nothing, does it? The words I have a dream are totally different. Now, I know I'm using a ridiculously obvious example here, but that's what, the way I see this is the same as the clash between a brand manifesto and vision, mission, and values. It's that clear, right? Is if you can go down this route, don't call it the Martin Luther King route because that's completely unfair to Martin Luther King. But it's the difference between I have a strategy and I have a dream. Okay, I know I've kind of talked at you, and I tend to do that because I get, as I said, I'm like that little child at the beginning of the presentation. I love branding. I love strategy because I think it's fundamentally the most powerful tool any business has. And I don't think people take it seriously enough or give it the love that it really should do. But they are transformative vehicles for your business. And if you can do something like a brand manifesto, again, it's transformative. And it takes people along the journey. It makes people notice, and it makes people think critically. I like those people. I'd like to work with them because they're just like me. Any questions? Any complaints?
Thanks very much, Andy. We'll come back to, I'm conscious of the time. I've got lots of notes. I've written lots of things down. My head hurts now. I have to rethink things. Anybody got any insights or any kind of comments they'd like to make? I know we're quite close to time, but anybody got anything they'd like to? Alex, yes, or Alex, yeah.
That was really helpful. Thank you very much, Andy. It's Joe and I are currently re-looking at the Nimble brand and have been exploring where to start. We've been through a number of brand exercises in the past, and this is definitely this manifesto framework in terms of the 6 different columns is another great structure to look at, and I can see it being practical and helpful in terms of kick-starting some great discussions. But the main thing, going back to your can't see the wood for the trees image, is it's very, you've got to work hard to get it succinct and clear in each of those columns. But when you do, then you've just got it on a page, which is essential, and then easy, like you say, to bring a team along, keep conveying it to the company, and making sure that we live it and breathe it. So that was really useful. Thank you very much.
I would say, Alex, on that, it's about having the courage to leave things out. That's the thing, is to go, hang on a minute, right, okay, I've got these 10 things that are wonderful, I think they're wonderful, but actually, which ones can I remove? And you want to strip things back to that absolute basic. Which are the buying triggers? Which are the things that people look at and go, hello, that's interesting.
Yeah, I can see that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think for me that was the thing about leaving things out. I think, like everybody, you get carried away with writing things, and it's and this, and sometimes, and then you end up,
Well, the key is actually, Suzanne, is that we always underestimate the intelligence of our audience, because we think we have to say things. So much of it's in the subtlety of communication. We are all of us here are intelligent individuals. We understand subtle communication, hints and this, that, and the other. We see things that for some reason, when we become marketers, we forget who we're talking to. We're talking to ourselves sometimes, and we don't realize that if I get it, they're going to get it, right? Unless you have such a complicated product that requires, long form sentences. I just have the courage to cut back.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we do forget that we don't have to tell everybody everything. They do have the ability to understand and take the nuances. Anybody else or anything that they're looking at the moment? Yeah, Michael?
Well, I just wanted so thanks, Andy. I thought it was a really great presentation. The thing that struck me in this was the two examples that you gave of the Bay Tree and the safeguarding company. And I thought your example of the Bay Tree was really fantastic with the new logo. I mean, it really did kind of explode with flavor and color and whatever. And the safeguarding company, I mean, it's a world away from the one team logic which I guess is a pretty low bar to set, Odin. And you did remarkably well. But so the question is really how much of this is tied up with excellent graphic design compared to branding, because the final thing looks really remarkable. Yeah.
It's a good question. There is a fine line, everyone knows, of the connection between strategy and identity. And the thing, I am usually a creative director's worst nightmare, and I'm insistent on being involved in that, because a good strategy can be ruined by bad identity. But in the case of the Bay Tree, if you'd given a traditional brief, right, we wouldn't have got that identity. We gave them a manifesto and just said, go for it, right? It's just that, because creators like nothing more than being able to come outside of their box and go, right, let's explore different things. And in fact, we had 5 or 6 versions, and they were all fabulous. It was difficult in the end to decide which one to go with. But what happened is that the creators were able to the brief was literally that statement. So instead of going, it's got to appear here, this, and go, here's your brief. It's a brand manifesto. Now go off and create the design that you feel reflects that. And we felt that it did. And it's just a refreshingly different way of doing things. It gets, we work, this is a creative job, whether it's strategically creative or design creative. You can't be creative without pushing things, without, coming out with these principles and values and mission. But yeah, it can be design led. And sometimes we all know we've seen a fabulous design that we have to somehow retrospectively fit it into the strategy. That does happen, right? But usually it should be driven by, I find it easier to drive it from a manifesto perspective as a brief, because it means, and this sounds like lazy, a design brief can be a very long document, right? A brand manifesto as a brief is not, right? But there's a lot of pressure then on that brand manifesto being correct.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was remarkable. I think probably quite a lot of us feel way more at the one team logic end than the safeguarding company end in terms of brand identity. And I think that transformation, when you first put that slide up, I thought, my God, what's he going to do with that? And it was really quite something.
But it's quite interesting on that, wasn't it? Because the strapline became the company name, because the strapline described what they did perfectly well, as opposed to the name they put over the top of it.
Well, I'll just let you in. So they had an investment coming behind them. And one of the things we presented to the investors first, and their reaction was, are you about to tell us that we're going to rename our company, our strapline? And we said, yes. And they went, that's brave. We went, well, yeah, because it's the right answer, right? Sometimes you just have to turn around and go, it's the correct answer, right? It's sitting there right in front of you all along. Sometimes it is there. By the way, branding, most of the answers are in front of you. You just got to have the skill set to pick them out.
You two should talk, because Michael, with his R&D tax credits, actually can get a lot of money back for companies that are building new websites, new CRMs, etc. They did a tremendous job for us at C2S, didn't you, Michael? And actually saved us a fortune, and it was completely painless, which is what Suzanne and I loved about it most. Thank
It was
you.
painless. They did Michael did all of the work. Kate,
He did. I mean, literally, we had a couple of sessions online, didn't we? And we gave you what you needed, and then you just came back and you'd saved us a lot of money, which was fantastic. But you know, anybody building new websites and CRMs, I mean, you know, speak to Michael. He's the man.
But Angela, there's an important point here: is that the process that I've just shown you is also designed to try not to overspend. I have seen so much. I mean, in a way, I would say this, but in having run some ad agencies, you know, they're set up to increase spend. They're set up for margin, and I think they're doing a disservice to people. So you know, but you can't skimp either. You've got to get the right balance. You know, I have seen colossal fees, some spent on brand work that shouldn't and didn't need to be done.
And I think that puts a lot of people off sometimes, doesn't it? Because they just think that, you know, it is just such a huge expense. But yeah, no, really good session.
Yeah, lots of food for thought. I think that came out in the chat as well for people. I'm conscious of the time. We'll share the slides, but also we'll share Andy's details with everybody. So Andy very kindly, you know, if you need to delve a bit deeper or have a conversation about what's going on in your business and what you're looking at, then please do have a conversation with Andy. But thanks very much. Always, I think I put on the bottom of when we put the event together, often a difficult and challenging conversation, but always one that you come out with more value at the end of it, because it's good to challenge what you're doing. It's good to rethink, and it's good to relook at what you're doing. So really appreciate it, Andy, your time today. Thank you very, very much. And thanks very much for everybody. Don't forget tomorrow, if you've got the opportunity to join us at Malmaison with Kerry and the team at QBD, that would be great. And I'll share all the details. Thanks very much, everybody. And we will see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. Thank you. I can talk to you outside.
You can. I'll put the kettle on.
Indeed.